Hi, welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So today I have made a sketch with a 2B pencil, just a graphite pencil, nothing special, and I'm transferring it to the gel plate. So today I'm going to kind of use paints with different consistencies. And then I'm going to have a disaster at the end that I will go through with you. So that transfers very quickly. There's no time required, just a few seconds. So you can see it there. What I did do was I've put a lot of line work in because this will show at the end in the final picture. Now this paint I'm using is Dayler Rowney System 3 and it's high flow acrylic paint, but it has a nozzle at the end of the bottle, so it allows you to use it like what would you call one of them? Almost like a pen. You can control the flow of the paint. So this has a lot of paint in the bottle, and the nozzle is quite free flowing. So I've got a lot of control over the line work that I'm putting out. You can see there, it's got quite a thick consistency. And it does dry fairly fast as well. I'll put a link in the description for this. So this is phthalo turquoise, this colour. And I'm moving, this is at normal speed, this video, so you can see I'm moving fairly slowly and carefully. But once you kind of get a rhythm going, it's easier to move faster. What I do like about this is the different consistencies of paint that come out. And also, some of the lines are thick and filled. And the way the nozzle is, some of the lines are actually almost like an outline of themselves, where there's a sort of clean line in the middle of them. So I was really happy with this actually. I've got a lot of control over it. I like the way that it can be thick and thin. However, now with the gold one, I have used this a lot and it's nearly empty and it's just a bit harder to control. I'm having to squeeze the bottle to get the paint out, so it's coming out quite thickly and you can see the difference there. Now the other thing I would say is this could be done with a paintbrush or a stick or a silicone wedge. Really anything you can think of that would put the paint on the gel plate. And having that variety of ways of putting the paint on is part of what makes a picture very interesting, especially when you're doing a monoprint like this on the gel plate. It's one of the beauties of the gel plate. Because this would be much harder to do directly onto the paper. With the gel plate, you can clean it up a bit as well, which we will do later on. So this lemon yellow, this one's also quite new and full. But what I found, I don't know whether it's because of the paint type, the pigment that's in it, this yellow almost kind of expands as it dries. So these tiny little horizontal lines that I'm making do actually start coming together a bit. But I do use a silicone wedge, to break it up again. And that just adds to it actually. It's another kind of mark making on it. So I've been doing a lot of painting and drawing recently, and I'm hoping that I've learned some techniques and maybe just honed some skills that I can transfer to the gel plate. So what I'm doing here is, you'll see how quickly this lemon yellow expands here. It just comes out very thick and I've got less control. And it's probably one of those things that it is to do with, how the pigment affects how the paint consistency, and also maybe the way that I've kind of cut the nozzle as well. The phthalo turquoise, I cut it more in a diagonal, and I think that's given me more control. So now we've changed consistency of paint. This is heavy body paint out of a tube, and it's alizarin crimson. And I'm using a wet paintbrush, so this is actually coming out very thin, very watery. It's quite hard to control, as in the paint will move around. The water makes it bead up slightly, so you get, it's like a rough line where parts are missing. And I just think that the mixture with this and the thicker paint is just, they work very well together. They make it look like there's parts of these kind of structures that are fragile and papery maybe and thin, and other parts that are more like maybe like a bony structure that's holding it together. I've really enjoyed working with those little bottles and the paintbrush here because I've been doing a lot of painting and drawing. It does feel like, you know, I'm still doing that on the gel plate rather than brayering out, although I will say using the brayer and covering large areas and making all the patterns is one of my absolute favourite things to do. So here I am with the silicone wedge. Now, this paint has dried slightly in the last few minutes, so it's actually easy to pull the silicone wedge through. So this kind of half dry, half wet stage, it's easy to manipulate it. Although I think when it's dry, you could pull the silicone wedge through it and remove some, but you would get a different edge type. So I go back into these lines on a couple of different occasions. Because it is still damp, it does expand a wee bit back into itself. But I really like how these turned out because they ended up very loose and they took on a more fragile appearance as well. More like they're tendrils hanging rather than a sort of solid structure. So this yellow that I'm removing, I end up mixing it with the alizarin crimson to make orange. I've been doing a lot of work with a limited palette lately, so here, phthalo turquoise, lemon yellow, alizarin crimson. And then we have the gold, but the gold is only used for the decoration at the start. And then I just mix my colours from that limited palette, those three, red, yellow and blue colours. I have left the whole process in because this actually did come together very quickly. It was the drying time at the end that took a long time, and then the actual rescue of the disaster that I had to do, but it all worked out fine in the end. So also as well, I'm working with this just while it's all wet. I've not let it dry. However, you will notice like the alizarin crimson that I applied very thinly with the wet paintbrush, that's dried now, as you would expect it to, whereas the thicker paints are still wet. So here I was using the silicone wedge to apply that orange paint, and then what I've done is I'm just patting it with the wet paintbrush. I used the silicone wedge in the first place because I was working in tiny little nooks and crannies, but also adding the wet paintbrush at the end just allows it to sort of move around in a more textured way. So it's going to look rough and more fragile, more fluid, if you like something that can be manipulated much easier than the sort of yellow and turquoise that's around it. So here I am removing more of the yellow again, which I will add some phthalo turquoise to and make some green. Next time I do the graphite transfer, I'm going to use a variety of, pencils, so that some are like an H and some are like a 4B. So you've got a variation of the kind of greyness and also the smudginess and the darkness of it as well. So this lifts, in the end when it lifts, these different consistencies of paint do come through on the final pull. It's very enjoyable just painting on these little lines. I had purchased some 6x6 square frames, and I have made this to fit in one of those frames, and I show you at the end in the frame. It was just to make some little mini artworks because I got them half price. So what I'm doing here is I've drawn some sort of vertical wiggly lines with the pencil, and these triangle shapes I'm adding the orange to just now. But I'm just patting in the wet paint, so we will see the pencil lines at the end, but then we're going to have this sort of patted, rougher texture behind it. So we've kind of got two patterns just from the way that we've approached it, but also they do work together. There's something about the gel plate. It doesn't just look like pencil lines with paint on top. They merge together very well, and you'll see that at the end. So that red was dry that was in that shape in the upper right, and I've just added orange over the top, and I'm putting some green into those yellow lines just to give it a little bit of a background. So you can see the lemon yellow has expanded into itself a bit, and I'm just using this little silicone wedge to sort of break it up into the lines again. I'll put a link for these as well in the description. I just purchased a kind of set called ceramic tools, and it comes with a range of items, and I do use most of it on the gel plate, to be fair. They're good mark making tools. So this is us nearly finished the actual painting part, and we do need to let it dry, and the drying time was a good couple of hours. I think I left it for. I mean, it probably would have been a dryish in about half an hour to an hour, but I just left it for the full 2 hours to be sure. This is where my problem arose. That white paint that I've put on, I maybe needed to put on a bit more than I did, but also it dried very fast, faster than I anticipated for, and I think it was my messing about here that did it. Also, I feel I took too much paint back off and I should have left more on, because at the end of the day there are some thicker structures there to pull up. I also think the paper I used was, it's good printmaking paper, but it's more of a watercolour type paper. And I don't know, because what I found was this white paint, because it dried so fast, when I pulled it up, so much of the white paint was left on the gel plate, and therefore a lot of the painting was left behind. You'll see it here. That's me just taking off some of the excess from round the outside. So I do leave this for about half an hour, and you'll see it's just coming up. You can see there so much of the paint is staying behind on the gel plate. So what I do is I put a book on top of it and I leave it for another half an hour. This is a heavy book, about 3 kilograms. And it's really not changed it at all. So then what I do is I'm trying to press on areas to see if it'll come up, and it just won't. The white is so dry now. So then I decided to wet the paper. I sprayed it with my spray bottle. This was a mistake because as this dried, it then tore on the gel plate. Well, it stuck to the gel plate. I thought because it was printmaking paper, I might get away with it. And then I decided to blot it up with the paper. Made no difference. Then I used my painting towel. Look at it, it's a mess. And so what I've done is I've sat a plastic bag and a book on it, and I leave it for another half an hour. In fact, this might have been a couple of hours. I think it was, because I was letting it dry. So you can see there that not only is the white not lifted, I've actually got the paper, the sort of layers of paper kind of sticking to the gel plate now as well. So I've got out the matte medium and I'm giving this a try. So some of the paint that's stuck to the paper, but it's hanging. I don't want it to lose its place of where it should be, so I have stuck some of that back down on the paper. I'm spreading the matte medium over the gel plate, and it's actually worse at the other side than it is at this one. I'm just keeping the whole process of putting it on in so you can see just how I deal with it, because I don't want to leave big ridges of gel matte medium either. This side is, I almost gave up when I seen this side actually. Do you see how much of that is stuck onto the gel plate? But we rescue it. I knew this was a good painting, that's why I put so much effort into saving it. This is the first time I've actually had a problem with this paper. It normally works very well. I really do think that the paint was far too dry to begin with. You know, the white paint I was lifting it with. And so I leave this overnight, and you know, it's probably about 10 hours all in. I leave it for, maybe more. I'm taking away the excess glue. Should I put a book on it for a wee while as well? Just to make sure that the matte medium and the paper and the paint on the gel plate are all making very good contact. But I only leave the book on for about half an hour because I need to let the air in to dry it. And this is me in the morning. I hadn't even had my coffee at this point. I just went straight down to it. Oh, I was so pleased. I'm rolling that gel plate off. I'm determined not to just have one area that's not worked ruin the picture. There we are. So, I really do think that, you know, doing this fine detail on the gel plate is going to be a very nice way to add to the techniques we already use on the gel plate. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.